Oh, would you looky there? It's another reading vlog. Yeah, I'm back with another one. These are really fun, and I have a better idea of what I'm doing this time, so hopefully this one will go a little bit smoother. This is going to feature 2 books, as long as I don't change my mind, which I do, have the right to do at any point. But I'm hoping to get this first part shot right before I go live with Chatting with Nuts. I'm going to be with Carlos and Yolanda from StoryTube. In this episode, I'm really excited about that. It's Friday. And then I'll be reading more over the weekend, and then I will most likely take my recording stuff and my mic with me to Denver on a work trip and record some in the hotel room because I get super duper bored, and then hopefully one when I get back. When I'm on those long plane rides, I get a lot of reading done, so I should be able to wrap up this maybe in hopefully 3 parts. We'll see. The whole theme of this vlog is a forgotten epic and possibly a new one. But the newer one, I think, is going to be a little bit of a harder sell for many people. I'm just excited after I've read the first part of these 2 books. I'm just thrilled to be in both of the worlds. They're very distinct. They have great world building and are very just by themselves in what they're doing, even though they have a lot of other inspirations, which is really great. First, I'm going to start out with the one that I think has a very good chance of being kind of revitalized maybe a little bit. You don't see this one talked about anymore. It doesn't seem, and I know there's at least one of you in the comments when I show this book, you're going to go, you're going to push your glasses all the way up to your eyebrows and be like, I never forgot about this series. And I named my daughter Pliocene or whatever the era is actually called. I'm talking about The Many-Colored Land, okay? This book is by Julian May. This is part of the Pliocene. I'm probably going to say it 8 different ways, but the Pliocene era or saga is a 4-book series. It's a quartet. And if you go back in time and you go read old articles with top 10 sci-fi fantasy list from any major publication, maybe even 15 years ago, you would see this all over the place. I mean, people love this series. It has so much notoriety for the people who have read it, but it seems like whether it was out of print or, maybe the genre change, which I think might be part of it, and Julian May seems to also have comments on that in an essay I read from her. I don't know what it is, but when you actually look into people who have read this series, everyone says this should be mentioned alongside of the Book of the New Suns, the Culture series by Ian M. Banks, all these other things. And there's even, my clip just fell off my mic, there's even a companion novel that Julian May wrote some stuff for herself, though she does recommend really only using the glossary until you finish all 4 books. She doesn't want to spoil anything for you, but I mean, that should tell you the level of world building is in this. I've seen other books that have companion novels like The Wheel of Time, obviously Book of the New Sun as well. There's a lot of material for that. So there's that material for this. And reading the first part, which is about 100 pages, it sets up the fact that I don't know if I want to call it a utopian society, like a galactic society, but there's certainly a union and a standard way of doing things. Different countries have their own colonial planets, and it's far in the future. I believe we've met other aliens, and everything seems hunky-dory. It should be great, right? Well, not so much. There are some people who are looking to leave this place, right? And there's a name for the society or like the galactic civilization. I'm forgetting what it's called, the Union. But they want to go somewhere else, and that is into exile, which is possible through a time machine that was invented. It's a one-way ticket, and you go to the Pliocene era of Earth like 5 or 6 million years ago, and you can go there, and they call it exile. There are a lot of people who want to go to exile, and at first the guy who invents it, he dies, and his wife is kind of apprehensive letting people pass through the portal because, bad things can happen, paradoxes, all these things, but she's hard up for money. So she starts actually sending people through for money, and then more and more people go. So we get a ton of perspectives of people who want to go into exile or are being forced into exile through this portal back in time. There's different characters. There's a xenophobic jerk for sure in there. Name, I think it was Voorhees was that one. There's a futuristic driller who is just bucking back against the system. There's a troublemaker. There's a former athlete. There's someone who has like psychic abilities or psychoactive abilities, magic. I don't really understand it. And she has lost her abilities, and she's not seeing the point of it anymore. So she wants to go somewhere else. She's going to exile. So there's a lot of people going back to this Pliocene era for different reasons. And I am so excited to see what awaits them. The whole first part is introducing the characters, introducing the current time, which is way in our future, and then how the portal came to be. So it's a lot of setup in that first 100 pages. And I was getting ping pong back and forth between all these perspectives. And at first was having trouble getting my footing, but as you go on and you meet the POVs, and they kind of reoccur, they show up every, the same POV will show up in a couple chapters. I started to differentiate them in my head, and honestly, some of the humor was really funny in this as well. And there's some darkness, for sure. I mean, you can tell like that future society is not all perfect. So I'm curious to see what happens whenever they all go through. It seems like they're all looking for something different out of this exile or experience. One is actually chasing a love. I have a feeling that's not going to go well. So between romance being set up, definitely some xenophobia, and then crime. I mean, there's a lot, right? So all this part one was a setup, and I am so excited to see what is on the other side of this. Julian May seems like an incredibly intelligent person and an author that took a lot of time to craft this. Listen, if you're a big fan of capitalized words that we don't know, aka world building terms, you're going to love this book, because I bought the companion not so I could read the spoiler sections or anything or the essays. I actually bought it so I could have a glossary of every single term, because there's a lot of stuff. I mean, you were thrown into the deep end, just like a Malazan, just like a Book of the New Sun. You're in this and you're going to learn, or you're going to drown, one of the two, right? I don't usually get frustrated by that. I get curious, and I'm very curious about what is going to happen. The only thing I'll say right now, just in part one in the setup, I do know that there's a ton of Celtic inspiration in this, from mythology to history and culture and figures in history. So you may enjoy this if you're at all into, Celtic stuff, I guess. You may want to check this out. But so far, so good. Love getting into this world, this forgotten science fiction epic. And some people say it's sci fantasy. I'm not going to. Julian May refers to it as sci-fi, so that's what I'm going to refer to it as. I don't really care. I think it's all in the same realm anyways. Now, the other book I started that I finished part one in, a little over 100 pages, is Black Leopard, Red Wolf. And I had to look and read in reverse because I constantly forget the name of this. And I know some of my friends call it Blue Eyes, White Dragon just because, it's easy to remember. Marlon James, the only thing I've ever read from him was A Brief History of Southern Killings. I didn't finish it. I read the first quarter of it and then realized I had no time to actually finish it. I will one day, but I was so impressed with that book and the way that he wrote with such a strong narrative voice and different voices for each character, and I just loved it. I love someone who has a very distinct style. Even whenever that style doesn't always work with me, I just appreciate someone sticking out in the crowd, and Marlon James is certainly that author. And Black Leopard, Red Wolf is no exception. But I've heard it is African-inspired fantasy. I've also heard Jamaican-inspired. I'm not sure I'm not sure where all the inspiration comes from and what it's pulling forward is. Like, I knew the Celtic stuff in Many Colored Land because, it's pretty much right there on its face cover. So I need to do a little bit more research in this, but I'm trying to stay away from anything about the book because I don't want to be spoiled, because I have almost no idea what's happening in this book except we're following someone named Tracker in a world that is bleak and grim and brutal. There's men turning into leopards, going back into leopards. There's humans doing the deed. There's humans and leopards doing the deed. This is already in this part one. You get a very sympathetic backstory for Tracker that I think anyone could, extend their empathy towards, but also he is not the most likable protagonist of all time. And he is young. I think he's somewhere between like 17 to 21 from what I can understand. And he's a bit prickly and very frustrating at times, a little bullheaded, stubborn, like we all can be. But the world is so alive. I mean, there's these little like fairy people walking around. Everything's dangerous. Everywhere you go apparently is super dangerous. I'm sorry I keep touching my nose. I don't know why my nose just started running. Anyways, there's a lot about the culture here. Like circumcision's a really big deal, which I kind of find interesting. I mean, it's kind of weird, but it's also interesting because that did play a really big role in our history at some points and in how we divided people and whatever else. That's here for sure. So I think there's a ton of culture that you could dig into that he's setting up here in the book. And it's pretty wild. Beliefs of like bottom teeth coming in first on a child means that they're cursed and that you have to get rid of them. There's a lot of graphic content. I am actually kind of flabbergasted that somebody said that it was the equivalent of the Marvel Comics universe. Michiko Kakutani from the New York Times. Dude, no. Don't agree at all. When you say Marvel and Marvel Comics, I'm thinking like superheroes, kind of family friendly. I know comics can be mature, but like Marvel? Dude, no, not at all. This is a very, very dark story so far, and all of the sexual content you could ever imagine is in this book of all types and natures. I mean, it is extremely sexually graphic, which I was shocked by. Again, because I read and people are like, oh yeah, it's like Marvel Comic Universe. Who's writing these taglines? Like, do they just have a bucket of taglines that they pull from? It's the dumbest comparison I've ever seen. And maybe, you know what, hey, in fairness, maybe as I continue the book past part 1, I'll figure out more about what the story's about, because it's all set up right now. Like, it's all vibes. You're just traveling with Tracker as he has left his home because of circumstances, and he's meeting people. He's learning things. People are viewing him different because of where he comes from. It's wild. So maybe down the road, when I actually figure out what this plot's actually going to be about, maybe then I will see this Marvel Comics universe. But just in tone alone and content, it's a ridiculous thing. And I will keep my eye out. I'll try to argue with myself as I go through. But my God, Marlon James's voice is going to put off some people, I'm sure. But for me, after I got in through about chapter 3, I just like switched into neutral and just kind of gliding along this bizarre, weird, dark tale following someone named Tracker. By the way, the whole story is framed as if he's talking to somebody, like a priest or somebody who's actually going to, be incriminating him. I think he's a prisoner, and he's kind of recanting his tale of how he got here. We get a little bit of setup in that first like paragraph or page or so, which is probably what I'll try to read maybe in the next excerpt of this. Maybe not. I don't know. But something about like a queen's kid dying. I think that he might be responsible. There's a lot of stuff about children in this book, and how they're viewed and thrown out, but also like how they're deformed or passing on. I really don't know. It's hard to get a good grasp on exactly what's happening. I'm just now understanding the character dynamics and how the world works a little bit. So, I mean, this one is critically acclaimed, but so many people seem to DNF this. Like, I feel like 1 out of 10 people I watch pick this book up, end up DNFing it, either because they don't like how dense it is, because it is dense, or simply because of the graphic nature of the book. I mean, it's extremely graphic, and it is told in a way of which someone is telling a story, right? I am assuming this narrator is going to be unreliable at some point, but I don't know that for a fact yet. I haven't put my finger on anything, but you're certainly seeing it through Tracker's view, which can be sometimes a little bit, I don't know, I want to argue with him a little bit, which is good. It's fun. So those are the 2 books. We got one that seems to be like a modern day pariah when it comes to popular reads, but also critically praised. Maybe this will be one that will grow in time. There is a book 2 and a 3rd on the way this year, I think. I'll probably be reading them as long as I like the rest of this. And then you have a sci-fi epic that a lot of people have forgotten about. And we can't let this slip into the past, because so far through part 1, I can tell that this is really special. So that's how this reading vlog's starting off. I got to go do Chatting with Nuts. I'm pushing up pretty close here. Nothing like a time crunch, but I look forward to talking to you soon. I'll probably be done with part 2 and 3. I don't know. I'll probably be a good way through these books by the next time I give you an update, which will most likely be in my hotel room, but maybe not. I don't know. See you soon. Welcome to part 2 of this reading vlog, where I am in beautiful Denver, Colorado. Well, kind of near Denver, I guess. Very beautiful outside, nice view. Almost didn't do this because I only got 2 hours of sleep last night, because for some reason every time I come here for work, I can't sleep the first night I'm here. So I literally slept for 2 hours. But the good news is I got a lot of reading done on the plane. I unfortunately did not get to read much more of Black Leopard Red Wolf, though Wolf. I'll get it right one day. Anyways, I only read a little bit more of that into part 2. Part 2 opens up with a map that had a new area, and like basically telling a different story with Tracker still, and Leopard. But the map had something I love, and that is walls. In fact, it's a place that has 3 walls, each one going outward more. I have a good feeling about it. I'm really excited. I only read the first chapter of part 2, and yeah, I'm excited to see where this story's going to go. And interesting, it's not picking up right where the other one left off. There's some time to go, and I'm wondering if the other parts of the book are going to be chronological or if they're going to jump around even more. I'm not sure. I have about 60 pages left of The Many-Colored Land by Julian May, and I have to tell you, this I'm just excited about this story in general, but I think this is just really wrapping me around its finger. There are definitely possibilities that there are maybe some logical leaps. Paradoxes abound because it has time travel in it, and we're kind of just like letting it go. And I'm sure there might even be plot holes. Like, I'm not sure. I'm not someone that pays attention to that. Like, if I see a glaring mistake like that, it means it's really bad because I'm paying attention to other things like the writing and the characters and whatnot. But yeah, we came through this portal, and let me tell you what, my expectations were about as wrong as the characters in the book, and that's all I'm going to say. There is so much in this book that does not go to expectations. Some good twists and turns and plays on time travel even, but also the Pliocene era. I can't say much else, except I really like where it's gone, and what she has turned the story into is what has me just pumped up to read the last 60 pages, and definitely the other books. I'm certainly continuing this series. Definitely going to be a high priority for me. We see new characters that we didn't see before they jump through the portal, which I like because we get some, not just fresh faces, but also other motivations of why they came through the portal. One person was trying to chase down the Hollow Earth entrance, which I thought was just amazing to read about. I don't think the Earth's hollow, but it's fun to think about. And the fact that it's in this story is like, okay, we'll go there. Why not? It'll be fun. In this Pliocene era, the wildlife and the nature and just the overgrowth, everything feels alien, even though it is Earth from millions of years ago. And I have just been really enjoying listening to the description she has of the wildlife that are around. And it's very, very dangerous. It's extraordinarily dangerous. That kind of plays into the situation that these people find themselves in, is all I will say. The hardest part for me, though, so far has been trying to grasp these psychic abilities. Basically, people can influence other people, they can control the people, they can speak telepathically. I think they call it like psychophysics, or psychophysics, I think is what they call it in this book. But it is a little bit hard to read because she just kind of like goes into it, and you're like, oh, okay, they're communicating in their mind. And sometimes it's like flashes of scenes, so like you're not actually sure of what you're seeing, but the two characters are sure. And it's a little hard to take in, but I like it. And also just the fact that there are a ton of characters in POVs. There are 2 distinct groups of people that have come through the portal, and you follow them around evenly in the first, I would almost say 3/4 of the book. But then when I got in, I think part 3 or part 4, which is like the final part, one of the groups is just like not getting any chapters anymore. Like, I think I've been like over 100 pages and I haven't seen the other group. And I actually like the group that we're getting more than the group that we're not getting. But it does feel a little weird. It feels a little almost lopsided now for what it set up earlier in the story. So I'm wondering if this is one of those situations where like maybe this book was split and book 2 is actually part of book 1, but the publisher made her split. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, a whole lot more capital letters being thrown around. The world building continues, and there is a sense of wonder with this. And I just like what she's doing with this. This could have been very vanilla and very, tropey, and it's not. There's stuff like that in there. There's even some references to other works like Narnia, which I thought was really funny. And then there's certainly a ton, like I mentioned earlier, Celtic mythology references here. And I bet you if someone is well-versed in that, and just in history in general, they're probably going to get even more out of this series than I am. But yeah, it is. It's something else. I mean, this is one that people should be picking up because this is going to be a doozy for me. It's a banger. So I will be finishing those 60 pages either in my room tonight, or I'll finish them on the plane. And then as soon as that's done, I'm back into Black Leopard, Red Wolf. and gonna finish that up in hopefully the next part of the vlog, unless if something absolutely wild happens at the end of Many Colored Land. I want to just update you about that, but it's gonna be hard without spoilers. A lot of this is hard without spoilers. I don't feel like I'm doing the book justice. I also wanted to mention that there might be a little bit for you Jack Vance fans out there. I do feel like there's a bit of Jack Vance vibes to this, not as fleeting and disjointed vignettes or anything like Dying Earth. But I don't know. There's something about it. I might be way off, but I'd be shocked if Julian May wasn't a fan of Jack Vance. So yeah, what a great reading month. Not the best trip to Denver because I always struggle to sleep, but the reading is carrying me on. And now I'm going to go get some dinner, hopefully read, and finally get some sleep. See you soon. Okay, so it's been a few days since I got back from my trip to Denver for work, which is the last time I updated this vlog, mainly because my sleep has just been horrible. It always gets messed up when I go to Denver. Usually when I come home, I get a nice rest when I come back, but I've just been struggle bussing. And then I also pulled a muscle in my left trap, my mid trap. And folks, don't get old. It's not very fun. It was not feeling well for a few days. And I didn't do as much reading as I had hoped, but I did do a ton of reading on the way back from Denver, which I'm really, really excited about because that's mostly Black Leopard, Red Wolf. I have a ton of stuff to say about that book now. I've also found out some things that I was kind of questioning earlier, like motivations behind the story and everything with MARLON JAMES, that I actually have answers to, so that's great. But I wanted to talk about Many Colored Land first in this update because, as you know, in the last update, I was really close to finishing this book. And I have to say, the ending did not disappoint, but it did feel just a tad bit rushed. One of the things that I talked about last time when I was talking to y'all is like the book started to feel a little bit weird because we'd been following these two groups, and all of a sudden in the last part, like it's just one group. And it's like, well, where did this other group go? Like literally not a single update. And I was able to confirm that book 2 does in fact pick up with the other group, and you kind of figure out what they've been doing this whole time. And I do believe this was a publishing decision. They decided to split the book. I think that's accurate. That's at least what I read on the internet, so it has to be true. The ending just felt like a lot of stuff. I mean, if you wanted a lot of stuff to happen in the final acts of this book, I mean, you're happy with it because a lot of really crazy stuff happens, and it is very epic. Like, it feels like epic sci-fi. I see people talk about Sun Eater a lot as being epic sci-fi. I think that Many Colored Land also has to be thrown in that conversation because, good lordy, there's some cool sci-fi stuff towards the end of this. I liked the events. I think it all made it interesting. I made me want to read book 2, especially see what the other group's up to. So on the whole, it's not a bad ending. It's just a little quick. I thought some of the stuff that was happening, I was hoping to get a little bit more time with. And then there was a case of a relationship, a romance in the book that I was fine with. I thought, this could be an interesting place to go, but I thought that it developed just a little too quickly for me. Not insta-love per se, but damn near close. Not the most egregious instance of insta-love I've seen, and it didn't ruin the story at all. So I did like the ending. I'm hoping when I pick up book 2, which I think is going to be relatively soon because I did really like this, and I like Julian May's writing quite a bit as well. And I like the characters. I want to see what the other group is up to. But I'm hoping that with the other group, figuring out what they're going to do, like maybe everything will feel a little bit more consistent, and maybe it'll go back to that methodical pace that book 1 had, and up until like the last 50 pages that I really, really liked. So this is a hit for me. This is a great, great sci-fi epic, at least an intro to it in book 1, and this is going to be one that I'm mentioning a lot more. And when people ask me like, hey, what should I read? Maybe I'll start throwing this in that list because, in a community where a lot of us read the same damn things, it's always nice to find something that has been a little bit forgotten. Many Colored Land, I mean, for me, this is like a good 4-star, 4.5-star read. I really loved it. And I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what other people think about it. If people start picking it up after this, I would like to hear what people think in the comments. So if you've read it, let me know. Getting back now to Black Leopard, Red Wolf, the second book that I got to finish in this vlog. I did say that I started out part 2, and it seems like there's a little bit more of a plot in part 2 than there is in part 1. Part 1 is very much a long introduction to Tracker and the world around him and his backstory. Part 2, we're doing what trackers probably should be doing, and that's tracking people. And in this case, with his super sense of smell. And I was also able to look up, without spoilers, and figure out that, yes, this is African-inspired. That's not just a tagline, but it's actually inspired largely by like the mythos of Africa and religions of Africa before any sort of involvement of Christianity or even like Muslim religion, just like really, really ancient Africa. And I think that that's really neat. And if we think about, the things that we see inspired in fantasy, a lot of it's just like medieval, maybe a splash of spice is like the Victorian area. Like, oh God, this is taking, the same kind of application of medieval history, but instead using African history and mythos. And it makes for some of the most bizarre shit I have ever read. I don't know exactly what pieces are inspired by African history or religion or whatever, but now I am more interested than ever about it. And the way the story develops is actually also inspired by how these stories were told. With kind of windy narrative structures that aren't always chronological and almost like a fleeting sense of narration where it's unreliable for sure. And also you'll just have random side stories, going on. So I think that those inspirations has kind of led to some of the things that make this book unique, because we don't see all that many stories inspired world building wise by this. But also in the way that it is told, which is really, really big. And Marlon James nails it. And as far as it being the African Game of Thrones, I read that Marlon James actually said this as a joke. And of course, a publisher was like, that's brilliant. That's the smartest thing anyone has ever said. And then immediately put it on like any magazine or book cover they could. And Marlon James says, he's not upset that he made the joke and it's caught on because, in a world that is very gray and people's lives are at stake, he says he can kind of see the relation, but it's so much its own thing. I see so many people comparing this to, I think Neil Gaiman said is well imagined as anything Tolkien did. And I'm afraid people will think that we're talking about Lord of the Rings here. And that's not the case. But there is something so awesome about this book where I have forgotten just how much I love when a group of interesting people go on a journey or go on a mission and just let it go from there. And there's hitches in the road, there's curveballs thrown, there's success and there's failures. And this is not uncommon in fantasy at all, in the modern fantasy genre or the classic fantasy genre. Lots and lots of journeys, D&D stuff, right? But the thing that has become harder for me as someone who's read a decent amount of fantasy at this point, I still have a lot to go, but I've been reading hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fantasy books, is I feel like the interesting people portion of interesting people journeying sometimes is the weak part of the equation. Not in this book. And I'm not saying that everyone watching this is going to love it, but folks, these people are so weird. Leopard went from a character that I was kind of like, this is a little jarring man shape-shifting into a leopard. He has a romantic relationship with Tracker, to him being someone that I cannot wait to see on page. And that natural letting the beat build feel of getting me invested in the side characters like Leopard and the boy who's following him around, which Tracker could not be any meaner to, by the way. I just find these people to be fascinating. And then you see people pop up and they have history with Tracker, and we are not aware as the reader. We have no idea why he has this history, what to come of it. And the more I read on, the more I'm realizing that the opening of this book, where we're kind of being set up with the frame narrative of Tracker talking to this magistrate or whatever it is, it's like, oh, those first few paragraphs are starting to make a lot of sense, which shows that Marlon James really took time to think about the way that he gave information out in the story. And anytime the further entries in the book recontextualize the beginning of the book, that's something I look for, and it is doing this. And I'm so conflicted about recommending it because the violence towards people and specifically children doesn't really go away. The language is very coarse, and there's a lot of repetition with some of the swears. Like one of the big ones is swearing against the gods, basically saying F the gods. And, you know, just what people say in this world, but it's like over and over and over. And I can see it grating on people possibly. It's like I'm positive only 2 or 3 people out of 10 are going to like this book. But I'm just in. And there's a people in this world that have a really interesting origin, but I won't spoil that for you. But they're called the Ogo, and there's a specific Ogo that's traveling with Tracker, and I think he is so tragically funny. Like his backstory is very sad, and he's kind of a melancholy character, but he's also really funny. And that's I know I'm talking about horrific violence and grimness and sexual nature and all these things in this book, but the other thing about this book is that it's actually really funny in a dark way. And Marlon James just has a knack for knowing when to put in those jokes, I think. Now, humor is subjective just like anything else, so you might not find this book funny at all, and I could understand that because the tone of it is very dark. It is vivid. It has crumbling world building where you get the mysteries and the answers all in these little tidbits randomly throughout the story, maybe not even from Tracker himself, but someone else in the story, and I'm connecting dots. This is not a fast read. I've only read maybe 120 pages in like 4 days, which for me is, you know, a little bit slower. But it's not about the speed. It's about engaging, and this book demands engagement. Also, there's trolls. I mean, how the hell am I not going to just love a book that has trolls that are mighty wicked? And Tracker, if you're watching this, Tracker, you fictional character, you like, dude, you don't have to call every single person that's a female a witch. They're not all witches, dude. You sound like someone from the Twin Rivers or the Two Rivers or whatever the Wheel of Time town is, where every Aes Sedai is a witch. I feel like Tracker might have picked that up from a different world or something. I don't know. There's debauchery, sexism. I think this is like one of the darkest things I've read, but I don't know, guys. I'm just having a blast with it. I finished out part 2 or part 3. I can't remember what part I'm on now. I have 150 pages left in this book, I think, roughly. And I will say that I felt like, you know, in this, when we're going to new towns, which all the towns are set up very excellently. The one thing I will say is when we got to, I think, the 3rd town, there's like a new character, and I liked the character, but I did start to feel like to slow down a little bit. And I'm looking at the book being like 620 pages, and I'm like, I think maybe this might be one of those books that I really wish was like 520 pages or 500 pages. But I can't say that until I get to the end. So we'll see. I'm not saying I'm not enjoying it currently, but I feel the slowdown, and I'm starting to take a look over at my next read, wondering what it is. So the immersion is there, but I am in a little bit of a slow spot right now, where we're kind of building up more of the characters. So we'll see how I go. I'm having a blast. I can't wait to finish it up, and then that'll be the end of this vlog. I think I'm only going to do one more update, and it'll be when I finish Black Leopard, Red Wolf, and that'll be the end of this vlog. So I got to go to jiu-jitsu. I just finished work. So I'm going to go to jiu-jitsu. My traps feel a little bit better. Felt okay this morning in the gym. And we'll see. Yeah. I'm trying to cut some weight right now, and it's not fun. Because I can't stop eating chicken tikka masala. But hey, nonetheless, I'll be back whenever I finish Black Leopard, Red Wolf. So this is the last update for the reading vlog, which does mean that I have finished Black Leopard, Red Wolf, which is sitting right over here on the side. I'm in my little bookish corner that I never sit in, but I thought it looked nice, so I thought, why not record here? I have finished Black Leopard, Red Wolf, and I love this book. When I think of modern fantasy and people ask about modern fantasy this, modern fantasy that, this is a book that I'll think of. It's kind of hard to recommend. It's so stylized, and I think there are people who are going to struggle with it if all you've read is just like some of the general epic fantasy stuff out there, you haven't kind of, expanded your horizons out to try more stylized works, I think it could be tough. I see a lot of people talk about Anna Spark Smith. Is that her name? Anna Smith Spark? I can't remember. She's like the Queen of Grimdark or whatever everyone calls her. But I've always heard that her writing is extremely stylized, and a lot of people actually end up saying it's a negative when in, literary works, most of the time, or contemporary fiction. Let's not get snobby over here. A lot of times that style is revered or applauded. And with fantasy or genre fiction in general, it's not as common, so people don't like it as much. That's going to be a pretty big stopping point for a lot of people. But I really did love this. And also, when I see a lot of people talking about how epic fantasy is dead, I mean, I'm just sitting over here looking at this book and I'm thinking, this is pretty epic. I mean, it might be a little bit more of a closer story because of the frame narrative, but make no mistake about it, it has some epic world building in it. And it also does it with only about 600 some pages or 500 some pages. It didn't need 1,000 to flesh out a world that is honestly unmatched in its influence and its originality, and how unique and visceral that it is. I'm impressed. I'm impressed by it. The world building. Marlon James is clearly a creative and an artist, and it shows. And whenever I hear him talking in interviews, you can tell this guy, he knows what he's doing. And a lot of people who know what they're talking about also seem to really enjoy his work. So he might be an artist, right? Like your favorite author's favorite author type of guy. I don't know if it'll ever have mass appeal. I want to talk about the ending though, because with this ending, I don't think it's a perfect ending. And it felt somewhat abrupt for me. Like when I was looking at the page count, what was left, I was like, okay, how is this going to end? And I do know it's a book one, but I still was kind of expecting a little bit more outside of the frame narrative, because we do see present day Tracker and he's telling the story to a magistrate or somebody. And I'm thinking, okay, we're going to get some events outside of the frame narrative. For instance, Name of the Wind, right? We always get some stuff in the present day. No, not really. This kind of just wraps up and then we end the tale. Banger last paragraph. I mean, some really great lines in there. My arm is so tired from holding up this freaking camera. I lost my tripod. I'll find it eventually, but I had to get this done before I record Bend the Knee. Anyways, I was expecting a little bit more from the present day. I know it's a book one, so I will definitely be reading book two and seeing if maybe some more of the present day stuff comes out. Or maybe this really is just a recanting of a tale, which is totally acceptable. I was shocked by how much I ended up feeling at the end of this book. I actually got pretty emotional, and I had more ties to the characters than I realized. That's a good thing, especially whenever the characters are so weird and, they're shapeshifters, they're doing all this crazy stuff, but I still ended up feeling a human connection. And I think what this book is at the end of the day about is purpose and like why you do what you do. And maybe justice, maybe just a little bit, a sprinkle of justice. But I think purpose and cause is at the root of the story. And it did resonate with me, even though I feel like the end was kind of like fireworks, bam, 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 bam. And then we closed out, the story was over. I am going to read book two, which I read the first page of book two, and it has a single sentence from a McCarthy book. It has to be a direct inspiration. I'm all for it. Like, I couldn't be more excited as someone who, as you can see right there, loves Cormac McCarthy. I love the fact that Marlon James seems to be picking up something from that on the first page of the second book. It's cool. There's a little bit of a farce that people say that the second book is just a retelling of the exact same events from a different POV. I've heard that this is not totally true and a bit of an undersell for the book. I've heard that, yes, we do go over events and we find out Tracker is a bit of an unreliable narrator. However, we also see a whole bunch of new stuff, original content, original scenes that were not in the first book at all. So I think that there's more to book two than just a retelling. I'm not the biggest fan of just the same events from different POVs. I can like it, but it's not something I gravitate towards. So to hear that actually has me way more fired up for book two, which I have sitting over there. And I just ordered, or I bought off somebody, 2 first edition hardcovers to add to my collection. I'm very excited about that. And I'm very positive on this book, even if the ending, like 3/4 into the book, I was starting to feel like, okay, what's my next read? And the ending had great stuff, but just a little bit, maybe, I don't even know if I want to say abrupt. It just didn't end how I thought it would. So maybe it's just my expectations. And I know I said the same thing about Many Colored Land. It just so happens that both these books have endings that I feel were just a little quick, but it's still a good ending. And it's still a great book, in my opinion. The other books that I'm reading, and that does kind of wrap up this reading vlog, by the way. But the other books that I've been reading this month that I'll talk about in the wrap up that's going to come out after this reading vlog is The Changeling by Victor Laval, I think is how you say it, a horror book that I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And then I'm also reading Born by Jeff Vandermeer. And what else am I reading? Oh, My Dark Vanessa by somebody with 3 names that I can't recall off the top of my head, unfortunately. But I'll talk about those in my monthly wrap up where I do the Patreon pick and stuff. So if you want to hear what I think about those books, check out my wrap up. This is a great reading vlog, a forgotten sci-fi masterpiece, epic, and then a modern epic African fantasy that is extremely grimdark. I had a great time. One of my favorite reading months and one of the most unique reading months I've had in a very, very long time. And I appreciate you checking out these updates and the shaky camera. Where is my tripod? I need to find my tripod stat. I'm sorry that this is shaky, but I will do more reading vlogs as long as people still enjoy these and maybe give you a little bit more of a taste of my daily life, possibly, who knows. But yeah, thanks for being here. Like, subscribe, YouTube stuff. Love you. Bye. I want to give a big shout out to my patrons, including my high tier patrons, my Kingsguard, which include Bridger, Zan, Adam K, Emil, Jonathan J, Prithvi, Eric B, Chadia, Steve Talks Books, Taylor D, Matthias D, Carlos, Yolanda, John C, John, Garrick, Evie, Henrik, Benjamin C, Sebastian M, Frank C, C. Scott, Jacob W, Darren, Jobot, Terrence F, Michael B, Lauren M, Nicholas E, Kai C, Kev, Ryan, Shad, Amanda V, Ikaika, RJ, Shad, Stuart C, Oscar A, Derry, Tanner, Stromboli Bones, Damon H, Kuiper, Adam, Caitlin S, Boss, and Curran G. Thank you all so much. You're the best.